is going to hit every single person who earns income, because it's 2% that's part of the Social Security and Medicare withholding. Everybody gets hit by that. So it's going to cost you 2% more if you're making $20,000. It's going to cost you 2% more whether you make $100,000. Failure to patch the alternative minimum tax is going to increase taxes on the American people by $88 billion. Expiration of business expensing practices, $48 billion. Expiration of other tax extenders, such as portions of the child tax deduction and so forth, $40 billion. New taxes as a result of Obamacare, $36 billion. Expiration of the 2009 stimulus, another $11 billion. The estate tax increase, $10 billion. The total tax increase impact of calendar year 2013 over calendar year 2012, $514 billion. That's a $500 billion in additional tax liability for people of the United States of America. Sound like a fiscal cliff to you? It sure does to me. Noodle that over amongst yourselves. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Feeling lonely this holiday season? Looking for little human interaction? Do you want to feel contact in certain special places?
Then why not go through security at an airport?
The TSA.
TSA agents are ready and standing by to give you a little something extra to feel thankful about this holiday season.
The TSA.
What are you waiting for? I want to check under your testicles.
Spending time with a TSA agent couldn't be easier. Simply book a flight departing from any American airport. When selected for a full body scanner, say no. You'll be pulled aside by a TSA agent, and that's when the fun begins. And you never know who your agent will be. It could be me. Or me. Or even me.
But it's probably gonna be us. Take off your damn shoe.
The TSA. It's our business to touch yours.
Welcome to the Bureau of Womanhood Conformity. Independent thoughts are considered subversive because all must agree with our leader.
When it comes to women, preventative care should include coverage of contraceptive services such as birth control.
You see, if you don't believe government should pay for your birth control, you're not a real woman. Womanhood denied. If you refuse to accept that pregnancy is a punishment, you're denied as well.
I don't want them punished with a baby.
If you don't believe that abortions should be allowed for any reason, if you don't believe in aborting a child for being the wrong gender, and if you don't believe that stay-at-home mothers aren't real workers, you are not a real conformed woman.
His wife has actually never worked a day in her life. His wife has actually never worked a day in her life.
Finally, for your safety, if you oppose mandatory government health care, you will die.
They will be voting to say that women can die on the floor.
These standards and regulations were formed after our glorious victory in the war on women. Thank you for your cooperation and your conformity.
Welcome back into the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the CB Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. If you found that to be of interest there in the last segment on the tax primer, let me give you a link to go to learn more in greater detail, as if that wasn't enough for you. That can be found at taxfoundation.org/article/fiscal-cliff-primer. That's taxfoundation.org/article/fiscal-cliff-primer. There's much more to learn. many more charts to look at, and if you really want to dive into it, you'll see a lot more. It's a well-written, easy to understand, and objective assessment of what's going to happen. Doesn't say whether one thing is good or bad, it just says what is. So, where do we go from here? What in the wide world of sports is going on? You know, it's hard to say. It really is hard to say. President Obama conducted his first press conference with the media in over 8 months. You certainly can't say that he's been a media hound. Can't say that he's been a camera hound. Can't say that he's all about getting himself on TV, unless, of course, you count all the various stops that he's made on the hard-hitting shows like The View and The Daily Show and so on and so forth. MTV and the like. And, well, I can say that for me personally, all I learned from the president's nearly 1 hour press briefing, I shouldn't say all I learned, what I learned from the press briefing is as follows. Number one, the president seems to be itching for a fight. Rather than evoking a tone of leadership and openness and encouragement for cooperation, he made it very clear that basically he's going to continue his policy of my way or the highway, his capitulation view of bipartisanship, apparently. Number two, that this president and the compliant media occupied airspace for approximately 60 minutes and failed to answer seriously and with any credibility any of the questions that were asked. Number three, with few exceptions, the White House press corps is comprised of individuals who apparently have never, ever asked a critical question in their life and do not know how to think critically. You have the opportunity to ask the leader of the free world a question, and you essentially ask a question that a 2-year-old could weasel out of with no effort, that they could walk away from with a simple yes or no answer that provides nothing. Again, with notable exceptions. It's sad. Number four, the president acknowledged that Susan Rice, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, after the attack in Benghazi, went out, trotted out to the various weekend news shows at the request of the White House. Now, as a recovering politician, or I should say a recovering candidate for office, I don't consider myself to be a politician, but as a recovering candidate for office, it amazes me how, in the course of his answers, he made sure that there was built-in wiggle room in case he had to walk them back. In response to the question about Susan Rice potentially being a potential nominee for Secretary of State, aside from, again, itching for a fight and challenging Senators Graham and McCain to bring it on. I paraphrase liberally. He said this: "As I said before, she, Susan Rice, made an appearance at the request of the White House in which she gave her best understanding of the intelligence that had been provided to her." So what does this statement mean? Allow ourselves to deconstruct here for a second. Number one, Ms. Rice did in fact make an appearance at the request of the White House. So is that to say that the weekend talk shows, the weekend news programs were struggling to find guests, and it asked the White House if they wanted to have somebody there, and the White House couldn't scramble up somebody to represent the political position of the White House, that they had to trot out someone else? But the fact is, Ms. Rice apparently was there at the request of the White House. Number two, the answers she gave were her own, in theory. Now, for me personally, this doesn't pass the sniff test. If you're there at the behest of the White House, clearly you're there with some sort of parameters, some sort of stipulations, some sort of instructions that inform you how you are to represent the White House. So supposedly she gave her best understanding. So it was up to her interpretation. Theoretically, she wasn't told what to say by the White House. Of the intelligence that had been provided to her. Here we go. We throw the intelligence community under the proverbial Washington bus. Because, you see, this is just her best understanding of the, insert parentheses, piss-poor intelligence that had been provided to her. Well, this would have been my follow-up question had I been the White House correspondent. What intelligence had been provided, and by whom? Did she have intelligence that weekend when she trotted out to the news programs on your behalf, Mr. President, that you didn't have? So later, when the truth comes out, and it will, that in fact we did know that it was not the pablum that they tried to spew about the video and spontaneous protests and all that other nonsense, that she will be able to say, well, it was my best understanding of the information that was available at the time. I was given bad information. Again, this stuff is so easy if we had competent White House reporters, but we don't. Anyway, I also would note that in a question about whether or not the president could give assurances whether military intelligence that military intelligence materials had not been compromised, the national security had not been compromised with the disclosures of the classified material that has been identified in the whole Petraeus affair, double entendres, that is. The president answered in such a way as, again, to allow himself weasel room. He did not assure us that there were no disclosures, but rather he assured us that there were no disclosures that, in his view, would have had an impact. Now, if information is classified, it's classified. regardless of whether you believe, Mr. President, that it could have had an